Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with KADY TV, at another segment of Good Morning Oxnard and Port Wine Eating. And first of all, what I want us to do is say, I want to thank you so much. You read the article, and now you're clicking in, and now you're going to hear the real voice as to what George and his team wrote about. And so this is kind of like an added bonus. So thank you very much for taking the time. There's so much. Can you just give us kind of little bullets as to what some of the things you're going to talk about?
Yeah, it was really kind of a boring, slow week, but we have a few things to talk about. We're going to do a separate section today on the Refugio Gaviota oil spill. And basically the news here is that it was the worst spill in 50 years, but it wasn't as bad as everyone thought. And it's kind of a big disconnect between what actually happened up there and what you're reading about in the newspapers and seeing on TV. Second, we want to talk about the ongoing budget problems for Oxnard, because the new budget will be submitted this Thursday and talked about Tuesday at the City Council meeting. As you know, we have to pull $10.6 million out of the budget. We're also going to talk about a very interesting thing that the fire department union revealed to me this week about response times and the effect of manning and equipment on those response times. And we're also going to talk about the interesting vote last night on the animal control budget and the implications of that. And that we finished up the labor negotiations on the excess leave scandal that we've been talking about for several months right now. And also compensation negotiations are underway. And then last, we're going to talk about the paving program. As you know, our mayor won re-election based on a promise to repave all the streets that needed work. And we had a consultant there last night with a very interesting discussion about criteria for paving and why we're doing what we're doing and when we're doing it. That's just a brief summary.
No, I love it. Now, I know some people have read the article and they only know, and I know a lot of you are in a hurry and have a really busy day, but if you can stay later on, here's some more of the details.
Right, yeah, and the details you'll get on citizensjournal.us on the web and on Citizens Journal of Ventura County on Facebook, and we're just going to do a summary here.
And that's a good thing. And again, to remind you of the technology, you can actually move that cursor and find the spot where maybe you want to understand about the animals, the fire department. But again, thank you for clicking in and after reading the article.
There you go.
What's the first topic we want to
Well,
hit?
the first topic, the big news right now in Oxnard is that we don't have enough money to pay the bills. We have a $10.6 million deficit that has to be closed by the end of the month before we vote on a new budget. It's my observation that the council really hasn't gotten serious yet about cost cutting. And I just saw an example last night. I worked till 3 o'clock the night before, and I got up at 7 o'clock yesterday morning to go to a meeting with the fire department union chief, and then I walked into this meeting which had kind of a boring agenda, and I had a real hard time staying awake, I'll admit. All of a sudden I heard $1.7 million, up 80%, and it's just the last few years. And they were talking about the animal control budget.
That would have woke me up.
So here we have a $10.6 million deficit, and they want to spend almost $2 million on animal control. Now what does that mean? Well, last year they picked up about 2,500 animals around the community that were mostly dogs and cats, but there's also over 200 birds, there were snakes, even livestock. And the question is, why do we have so many animals picked up? Well, it turns out that the animal control is done by the county. There's a facility by Camarillo Airport, and it's about a $6 million annual budget to run this thing. And almost $2 million is just us. And 40% of all the animals picked up in Ventura County are from Little Oxnard. Why is that? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. And why are we spending so much? So I thought the council went through and voted on it without really doing anything about demanding a way to reduce costs. And after the meeting, I spoke with Greg Nyhoff, the city manager. I said, are you good with this? He said, no, I'm not. I said, what the heck are you doing about it? He said, well, for one thing, maybe we shouldn't be picking up so many animals. Right? And two, we should be going after repeat offenders. There's a relatively small number of people that are the cause of these problems over and over again, either because they don't take care of their animals, or in some cases there are breeders of animals, somehow these animals get out. Right? So the question is, what are we doing as a city, not just on something like animal control, which I picked on as an example, but how are we really going to control spending? Because ultimately it either means we're going to get fewer services, and right now in the general fund, 65% of the general fund is public safety. fire, and police. Those are going to be the top targets for reduction. But here we are in a relatively high crime city, and they're talking about taking police officers off the beat and laying them off, and laying off firemen, possibly an entire company. Well, right now the fire department only has about 2/3 of the manpower it needs to be competitive with better run cities. So I have a real problem with that myself.
You know, it's amazing, and just to build a word I think I'm going to use for the first time is forensic media. And what's so beautiful about George is really just pushing for what the truth is. And, you know, that subject on animals.
Truth, justice, and the American way.
And the American way, I'm going to put an S on your shirt. But one of the things that, you know, reaching for the truth is, you know, animals are such an important part, such an emotional aspect of us as a culture. In fact, I know a few group of people who I won't name who would rather hang around animals than people. And so, you know, I can see the emotional draw, but then the fact is, are we choosing people over animals? You know, that's the challenge.
It's actually gotten down to that. You know, I'm an animal owner myself.
Yes.
We have cats. We just put to sleep a 21-year-old cat, but we had a backup cat, so we still have one.
I see backup
We
cats.
probably spent more on medical bills for the cat last year than on me.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, getting to the truth, because, you know,
Right, but I spend the money, not the government.
exactly.
Right.
And
Now,
is it,
I've never had the government spend a nickel on my animals, right? And that's the way we need to keep it. That's a private thing, private decision.
Exactly.
You love animals, fine, love animals, but do we really want to take money from the fire department and the police department?
Excellent.
To do that.
And so-
That's my point.
See, that's
Right.
where we're getting to the forensic media
Yeah.
and the very truth. Animals are very important to our culture.
Oh, they definitely
But
are.
within a certain confine of, let's call it government, that the priority should be people and
Well,
those
it's
things.
wonderful how a financial crisis focuses your priorities. And it'd be interesting to see what happens as a result of this little debate that we had last night. But on the area of priorities, I also met yesterday with the head of the fire department, Firefighters Association, Jeff Donabedian. And he took me through some interesting stuff. And the most interesting thing was the fire department response time and the impact of budget and manpower and equipment on that. Now, there's a national standard called NFPA 1710, which basically says you should be able to respond to a fire within 5 minutes from the time the dispatch gives it to you. That's broken up into two different components: how long it takes you to get ready to get out of the firehouse, how long it takes you to drive there. 5 minutes that's pretty tight spec. So the council has been asking for a report on fire response for at least a year that I can remember, and it was not forthcoming. It turns out they got as far as putting it on the agenda to do a meeting recently, and it got taken off the agenda. And I didn't know why. I didn't even know the report had been prepared, but I have a copy of the report right here, by the way, which I went over yesterday with the gentleman. And what happened is that it never got presented because there was huge disagreement within the fire department about the accuracy of the numbers. It's not that they lacked data, they just lacked the criteria to agree. According to the survey I saw, the actual response time was done only 60% to standard. So only 60% of the responses were actually met the 90% call. And the 90% call is not just getting 90% within 5 minutes, it's getting 90% with the proper equipment. For example, the national standard calls for an engine company to respond with 4 people on the truck. Well, guess what? The Oxnard standard is 3, so we already don't meet it. So according to the fire department union, the actual response is only 35% to the standard. And that's probably why it was never discussed at the meeting. So I started to dig in a little bit and say, why is it not? And he showed me a map. On the map, he showed me several areas that are not within a 5-minute driving distance of the firehouse to a potential fire. And he also showed me areas where there's not sufficient staffing. For example, Fire Station 1 by far is the busiest one in the city because it's also the nearest to the population center where the fires occur. And one of the reasons they built Fire Station 8, which I wasn't crazy about, is because there's a big area where no fire station is close to the potential fire. So that should greatly reduce the amount of response time. Then they worked on little things that made a big difference. For example, every single call that goes through dispatch is printed out on a printer, which they have to get the copy from that printer before they can go. And they were using these old technology printers that took a long time to warm up and run. So the simple expedient of replacing them with laser printers took almost half a minute off the response time. That's amazing. And that's a fairly inexpensive thing that they did. They're always looking at things like that. And I was asking Jeff, I said, well, you know, are you guys all ready to get dressed? He says, we have all our clothes laid out exactly in the right sequence to do it and stuff like that, so we can get suited up and get on the truck and get out of the firehouse as quickly as possible. So they look at every possible thing. And, you know, the fire department people are not your typical government bureaucrats. These are really gung-ho people. If you've ever been around a fire station, I've done stories on the things on CERT. I was a CERT participant and stuff like that. These people are like, they have almost like a childish enthusiasm. I mean that in a very positive way for their job. To them, it's not a job, it's a calling, it's a career.
Right.
And they really care about the people. And they, you know, so they wanted to convey to me, for me to convey to the public that, you know, I'm sure that you think, you know, that they don't want cuts in that because it's going to affect their jobs. Obviously, yeah, but it's also going to affect you. It's going to affect service. And by the way, do you know that 80% of all fire department calls are not to put out fires? They're medical calls.
Exactly,
right?
emergencies.
And I live on a street where there's a lot of fairly old people, including me, and it's amazing how frequently you see paramedics come down the street and call in someone's house. And you never know if you're going to be that person. And so that 5-minute response time could affect your life as well.
You know, it's amazing, and stretching towards the truth, it's just, I'm surprised that we put an exact number on it. You know, we say 5 minutes, and knowing that there's so many different variables. And,
There are. Well, you know, that's they want 90% to be within 5 minutes. It's
Right.
impossible to get 100%. For example, Jeff told me some days they just don't have enough ambulances. They have to get them from Camarillo or Newbury Park because there's simply no one to respond there. And, you know, some drives are 8 minutes. They're never going to make 5 minutes, but they want to get 90%. That's the target with the right equipment at the right time.
No, because like when you're actually the person that needs the urgency, I mean, a minute is not long, is too long, you know, it's just like.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like your experience, you know, if
Yeah.
it's 9 minutes, that feels like an hour when possibly somebody's life is there. So again, you know, stretching towards the truth, checking the process and things like
Well,
that.
there's things you can do too. For example, when you call, have the facts ready, know the address, know what's the matter with the person, know the name and stuff like that, so the fire department can respond better. They said sometimes they don't even know where to go. They get there and it's the wrong address. For example, on the beach rescues, he said a significant percent of the time, and he's a beach rescue, or he was a beach rescue guy, they call up and they don't know where they are. They say, oh, we're down by Fifth Street. Well, it turns out they're not by Fifth Street. They're up by the power plant or something like that. And valuable time is lost to get there.
Right.
Also, if you have a medical problem, maybe you want to think about where you live. Maybe you want to be near a hospital or near care, or have a trained person around, or even some kind of a device to help you. You can't always depend on the government to do everything for you.
Yeah, again, that's another truth, and we need to wrap up here. But another truth is to how much can I do something about, and
On
then
your own.
relying on the government for the supplementation
exactly.
versus, you know what, I'm going to do very little. And, you know, some people might be offended by that, but that's what I'm saying more maybe what the truth is, that if I really care about myself and my existence, and I realize there's some people who can't fit that category, but I know you and I can, and you're not old, so we're gonna have a really discussion on that one. But you know, so as we stretch towards the truth, you know, what can you do by yourself to its capacity, educate, and then have the government be a supplementation of what goes on.
Exactly.
You know, so that's. Is there anything else that you like to cover? 'Cause
I
I'm
do,
getting
yeah. You
about-
know, as some of you know, that Mayor Flynn won the re-election to the mayoralty in part by promising paving all the streets in the city. And they're actually doing pretty well. According to a report last night, they are on schedule for the repaving program. That's the good news. The bad news is expensive. You know, last night they talked about $1.4 million for the Hobson Park area, another $1.3 million for the Channel Islands neighborhood. And they're doing different types of paving in different areas. I never knew why until last night. A consultant by the name of Joe Reary from Pavement Engineering came and made a very interesting presentation. He explained all about pavements, concrete pavements, asphalt pavements, what makes them wear out. And one of the things he showed was the amount of wear from different types of vehicles. Did you know that a bus is 8,000 times harder on the pavement than a Chevy S10 Blazer, for example?
Makes sense. I'm not a scientist,
Well,
but
what
yeah.
about a 53-foot travel trail?
50-foot travel trail. I'm glad that you asked that.
How about a
Many times,
1974 pigtail?
would you
No.
believe, it's about 140,000 times. A garbage truck is 9,343 times more wear than a Blazer. A bus is 7,774 times as much.
So take that number times, and you just gave us 5 digits worth of numbers.
Well, yeah, I thought, I should know better being a former engineer, that it was roughly proportional to the weight. It's not. It's actually proportional to the weight, to the fourth power. And I actually have the formula the consultant gave me. I was curious. I went up to him and I said, how come these numbers are so much higher? He actually wrote down the formula for me, which we will publish in Citizens Journal this week. Another incentive to read the article about this. Right?
Wow.
So a couple other last things. The excess leave negotiations were finally wrapped up with the SEIU and one other local by our new personnel manager, Mr. Casio, working in conjunction with Randy Sloan, the consultant, who's still working with us. And we're doing compensation negotiations with most of the major city bargaining units right now. And last, the landscaping districts will be voted on this month, which will affect your tax bill for your house. That kind of wraps up what happened last week. Kind of a boring week, but some interesting things.
I thought we kind of did a good job of making it exciting, you know. So that's very much appreciated. So with that, I just want to make sure, take this moment that if you're watching this now and you read the article and you listen to this interview, I would say definitely it really makes you very special. And I want to congratulate you. You're somebody who I think makes a huge difference in this community, that you would take this time out of your day to be informed not only in the reading, but actually hearing the author and a collaboration about it. So congratulations to you who actually watched this whole thing. So with that, Peter Godinez, your ambassador at KEDY TV, again with my mentor, George Miller.